Elizabeth Zoning Board of Appeals. First item on the agenda is call to order. And I'll note that we are missing one member of our board. Jack Keneally is absent tonight. And we welcome a new member of the board, Michael Tranfalia. So welcome, Michael, as a member. The first item on the agenda, and you all have an amended agenda as of this evening, is the election of officers. And under the rules and regulations of the board is to elect the chair and secretary, each to be elected for 1 year. And the election apparently takes place, am I correct, Bruce, at the first meeting of each year?
That's correct.
So this being the first meeting of each year, nominations are open for the election of a chair for the year 2001.
David, I thought you did an outstanding job stepping in and filling in after Ann left to go to Washington, D.C., so I'd like to nominate you for a full term.
Seconded.
I know you're stunned, but you did such a great job.
Well, is there anyone else who would like to serve? Seeing nobody else stepping forward, we'll call for a vote on the nomination in the second. All those in favor? Opposed? I will abstain. Thank you all very much for your confidence, and I will do my best to continue to earn that this year, so thank you. Next, well, we also need to elect a secretary. Nominations for a board secretary. Anyone interested in serving as secretary? I know Jack has expressed a willingness to continue to serve as secretary. And in his absence, I suppose we can certainly nominate him to serve as secretary.
In light of Jack's willingness to continue, I nominate him for a second term.
Second. Any other nominations? All those in favor? Opposed? None. Show the nomination and second for Jack Keneally as board secretary as having passed by a vote of 6-0. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our November 28, 2000 meeting. We did not have a meeting in December. Any comments on the minutes that were in the board packet from the November 28, 2000 meeting? They look fine to me. May I hear a motion then for approval of the minutes if there are no suggestions for changes?
Move to accept the minutes of November 28th.
Motion, Mr. Frustasi. Second? Second, Ms. Miller. All those in favor of the approval of the minutes as submitted? Opposed? And abstentions? We have 2 abstentions, Mr. LaPlante and Mr. Tranfalia. Next item on the agenda is one item of old business, and that is to hear the request of Michael and Lee Wilson, 82 Two Lights Road, tax map U39, lot 4, for a conditional use permit for an accessory dwelling unit. This is a matter that was tabled from our November 28, 2000 meeting. And Ms. Wilson?
Do we need a motion to take it off the table, David?
May I have a motion to take it off the table?
So moved.
Mr. Frustasi, second. Second, Ms. Miller. All those in favor of hearing the matter of old business? Opposed? None. The motion to remove the matter from the table passes. Ms. Wilson?
Excuse me.
Anybody else joining you for the hearing this evening? Okay. Why don't you come up to the podium if you would, please? And everyone should have in their packet, in addition to what we were given at the November meeting, additional information submitted by the Wilsons for this evening, which consists of a handwritten note from Lee Wilson, it's like a sketch of the floor plan of the house with dimensions, and then another page that is a very rough sketch of a floor plan of a portion of the house, which I assume is of the area that is the subject of the request for an accessory dwelling unit.
That's right.
And another page which is apparently from the tax map.
That's right, it's a survey.
Is this the survey of your property?
Right. It's a portion of it. I blew up just the portion that was applicable.
Well, of the additional material that came in the packet for this evening, Ms. Wilson, let's make sure I know what we have here. One of the parcels is a 7-acre parcel, one is a 4-acre parcel.
Right?
And which of the parcels is yours?
The 7-acre one is the one that you should be looking at. It's actually, our parcel is actually 4 acres, 4.3, I think it is. Has been divided since this survey. Or this survey didn't reflect it, I should say.
Do we have anything that simply shows your property with the property lines?
I think that is it.
Mr. Frustasi, remind me from our November meeting, you had requested some specific information. Do you recall what that information was?
Actually, no, I don't recall the information. However, with the information before us tonight, I have a much better idea as to what we're talking about. Square footage of the accessory dwelling, square footage of the overall building itself, location of the accessory dwelling. The fact that we don't have an accurate description of the land may not be a problem, but I certainly would like to understand what we're talking about as far as acreage and the location of the property in relation to the new reconfigured lot.
The actual, the survey does not show one of the property lines, which is quite a ways away from our actual building, the structure. If you were looking at the survey that I gave you, in that 7-acre lot, it is probably 2/3 of the way over to the left, the property line is actually. The remaining acreage is just under 3 acres. Where our house sits fairly close to the other property line, you can imagine that the 4 acres would be a good deal over toward the middle, going left, if you're looking at the structure, going left.
Well, for the approval of the application submitted by the Wilsons. There are actually two sets of criteria that need to be met. Under section 19-7-5, which is on page 135 of the ordinance. Starting under paragraph B, there are a series of 8 numbered requirements that have to be met. And in addition, the Wilsons have to comply with the provisions of section 19-5-5, which is on page 51 of the ordinance, which is conditional use permits. And on page 52 of the ordinance, paragraph D has 6 standards for conditional use approval. So there are actually 8 standards that need to be met under 19-7-5, and then 6 standards that have to be met under section 19-5-5. So with that in mind, Ms. Wilson, we will let you give us a bit of a review
Okay?
of your request from November.
Right, okay.
And then after you're done, different board members will undoubtedly have some questions for you about the different standards that I've just referred to.
Right, okay. Back in the fall, I'm not sure of the date, it came to our attention that we needed a new septic system. In doing that, through the permits that was needed for that, we found that we had in our barn apartment a permit for the actual apartment, but not for a kitchen in that apartment. That apartment was done in 1985, I believe it was. Mike and I have owned the house just 5 years, 1995. So this was done well before we bought the house, and it had just come to our attention in the fall, as I said, only because we went through the process of getting the septic permits. So we are here to have the additional dwelling unit approved, if I'm understanding it, because of the kitchen part of it, not because of the building permit part of it. I don't know if it was supposed to be a different permit or what, way back in '85. When I went through the application and all of that, I had a lot of help of Bruce along the way, making sure that we had everything that we needed, and we found, of course, that we didn't. We had the survey done because my brother, 3 years ago, I think it was, built a house on the front parcel, and that is when my mother split up the land and the survey was done. The survey was done really for the purpose of him building the house, and I'm thinking that that's probably why the 7 acres were not divided on that specific survey. The 3 things that we did need, in addition to the November meeting, were the floor plan of the entire building, the floor plan of the ADU, and the scaled survey that we've been talking about. We had those things in the original packet, but they weren't, the scale wasn't put on them, I think, is what it was. And the setbacks were not on the survey. We didn't have the survey, that's right. So the 2 drawings that you have in this most recent package are scaled drawings to the best of my ability with my little ruler, and the survey. And what I've done is taken that ruler and, going by the scale of the survey, put in the setbacks there where our building meets the one property line that's really, I think, the most in question, or that would be of most issue in this matter. On the application that was originally submitted back in November, we answered all of the questions that I think apply, I could be wrong, to all of those requirements that you listed off. I do have copies of those. I think I've got copies of all of those that you listed off. And in that original application, most of those questions should be answered. I don't know if you want me to go through those line by line, or...
No, I don't think you need to review for us what you've written on the application. There is no one living in the accessory space now.
Yes, there is. He's a friend of ours who's lived there probably 10 years anyway, 8 or 10 years. His name's Tom. And he's been there right along. Yep.
Is he paying rent?
Not market rent, but rent,
He is paying rent?
yeah.
Are his utilities on a separate service?
No.
Phone, electric?
What's that?
The phone or the electric?
No, none of it.
And you've lived in the house for 5 years,
Right.
and he's lived there for how long?
I'd guess 8 to 10.
So he was there before you.
He's always been there.
And the previous owner,
Is my mom. Yep,
and was he paying rent to your mother also?
yep.
But, how much is the rent that's being paid?
That he pays?
Yes.
500.
And I'm sorry, what was your answer to Mr. LaPlante's question about the utilities? Are they separately metered?
No.
They're not.
It's only 1 meter. And he doesn't, it's all included.
How is this unit accessed? From
Through the,
outside access?
yep, through the house, you go, or there's 2 ways, actually. You'll go through the house and the sun porch, and then there's a little door that goes up the stairs. The stairs are on the dwelling sketch.
Where is the parking for this unit?
In the driveway.
Is,
The driveway has, you drive up and there's a turnaround. So it's a pretty big spot, and then you've got the turnaround.
Now, has John, is that the fellow's name? Tom. Have you become friendly with Tom because of the length of time that he's been there?
No, Tom was always there. He actually came into our family. He went to college with another close friend of ours, and we met him 10 years ago, and he moved to Portland because he had found a job, and yeah, he just has always been there. So I've known him from being there at my mom's house, which is now my house. So.
so it's a bit difficult to tell from the survey, but the driveway approaches the house from the right side? Is that correct? And
Right.
That's where the parking area is?
That's correct, yep.
And so to enter the unit, you go into the house and then up the stairs?
Right, no, well, you can, but there are 2 ways to get in. When you drive up, if you're looking at the survey, you see how the driveway comes up, and you're looking straight at the barn and to the left into the house. There's a doorway. You go in through the garage, and you can either go into the main house, or you can go up the barn steps, barn step. Oh, yeah, that one was on. That's on the original, in the original packet, too. Yeah, that photo is helpful.
not paying market rent? What would
I,
you,
my brother in front that is just built, also has a very similar apartment up over his garages. And I know that his tenant, who's also a good friend of ours, she's paying $675, I think it is. It's just what he's always paid, and we haven't bothered changing things. He doesn't have a lease or anything. It's not
So at one time,
really a typical tenant.
at one time, it probably was a market rent, but you just haven't raised it.
It probably was, right, yeah, 10 years ago, yeah.
Your survey shows that that unit is 10 feet from the property line.
Right.
And there appears to be only one house in the vicinity, which is 6 Jordan Farm Road.
That's right.
Have they had any comment
think it's-
regarding this?
3 George, I'm not sure, yeah. No, they have, she knows Tom, or they know, I should say. No, there's been no comments. Nope. She knows about us coming to the board and the building O'Brien's there on the corner of Jordan Farm and Two Lights in front of Painters also have a similar unit.
Who did you say owned the balance of that 7 acres?
My other brother, yeah,
Is that
my
a,
younger brother, and he hasn't built, he has no plans as of yet. He has plans down, way down the road.
and that is, so that is a buildable lot, but it's,
It is, it's buildable. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yes, it's buildable. He'll need to do, obviously, a road and water and all that
If you-
when the time comes.
If you look on the notice of public hearing that we made with the map, it does show the tax assessors division. It'll give you some idea. There's near, she's got 4 acres, it figures out to about 542 feet, I believe, across there. Well, maybe that wouldn't make any sense. It's only 498. Scratch that.
Bruce, can you give us some clarification if this is a quote-unquote rental unit versus an occasionally used unit? Is that a departure from this application, or are there some ramifications to the ordinances?
It's been my understanding that because of the wording of the ordinance, when they originally created a section, that they wanted to allow a bit more than just a typical in-law apartment. And that's why they went with a close personal relationship, meaning a friend or relative. It makes no mention to whether an applicant needs to have that a free rent. I mean, the ordinance doesn't say that you can't charge for it.
So under the criteria of a close family friend, which Tom apparently meets that criteria.
You know, and I don't know how I enforce that.
Right, how would,
I go to the site, I get a complaint, I go to the site, and they're got their arms around each other, then I guess it's okay. You know, it's a tough one, but I think the town, I don't know this, but from what I understand, I think the town wanted a little bit more than just the relative to allow these situations to happen.
that makes sense.
Well, how does the ordinance address a rental unit in that property?
A multifamily is 2 or more, and it requires somewhere up to 5 or 10 acres, depending on what zone you're in, so it discourages.
So would the zoning for this property permit a rental of a room or a portion of the house?
If you had enough land, yes.
Is there enough land here?
No. No. So that's why people, if they want an accessory dwelling unit, they have to have at least 12,000 square feet. And it has to be subordinate, and a single family appearance of the house has to be maintained. Cape Elizabeth strive to keep the single-family appearance of the town in check. And that's why they have the criteria they do. But they do realize that, you know, people should have the opportunity to have relatives or friends within the dwelling unit, providing it still looks like a single-family dwelling.
Can you get us to the right page?
Page 135.
What page were you looking for?
The one that speaks to the additional dwelling, whether it's used as a rental or
Yeah, it's page 135.
Page 135 is the accessory dwelling unit.
accessory dwelling.
Paragraph A there refers to the close personal relationship.
When you, can I just ask a question? When you asked if this has enough land, you meant for a multifamily, is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah,
You wouldn't be here
I think
before
I
the board
misunderstood.
if you had enough land as a multifamily, meaning two or more,
but I do have enough land for what we're coming
for
to.
an accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah,
yes.
okay, all right.
David, we've talked about these accessory dwellings ever since I've been on the board. And one thing that's basically loud and clear is, once you establish an accessory dwelling unit, there is no policing action as to who's going to occupy it down the road, once that close personal friend departs.
Well, that's not exactly true. There would be police in action if it was brought to my attention or if I found out myself. But I mean, it's tough on the face, if there's not a problem, to understand what's going on after that. That's correct.
But it's my understanding that if it was established for a close personal friend of the family or a family member, and that person decides to go somewhere else for one reason or another, that unit can be occupied by someone else. Is that not correct? I say someone else, someone that is not a close personal friend of the
Only
family.
under the guidelines of an accessory dwelling unit.
You mean it has to be a close personal friend that occupies that?
The approval's for, yes. Although that may be hard to track, that's the intent of it.
It's been my understanding that once it's established, that unit goes with the building, and if the person sells it, that person is no longer, that second party that's occupying it is no longer a close personal friend of the owner of that building. So you basically inherit
Go with
it.
the building and be used for the same purposes as an accessory dwelling unit for a close personal friend or relative.
If
So
Tom leaves,
If I bought it tomorrow, I could operate it the same way with my friend.
if Tom gets a job in New York and takes off, and they don't have a close personal friend available to take that unit, what happens to that unit?
Legally, they can't just rent it to anybody.
Yeah, the language in
my
paragraph
understanding.
A. The language in paragraph A speaks to it, that
Okay.
Dave pointed out.
Well, since I've got the floor, and thank you for clarifying that for me. I'm more concerned about the square footage of this accessory dwelling unit. The ordinance clearly states that it has to be between 300 square feet and no more than 600 square feet. And when I calculated the square footage based on the information provided to me, I got almost 800 square feet, 792 square feet of living space.
I don't, that's not what I,
That's why we asked for information to be presented to us. It's 22 by 36 is what I'm showing. Now, if that's
You
not,
have an area of 480 square feet shown on your application for the questions you answered, but then on your drawing, if you take the outside dimensions of 36 by 22, you do come up with actually, you come up with 792 square feet. That's what he's talking about. There's a contradiction there.
okay.
Is that
I think
within the eaves of the barn?
that's what I'm wondering.
well, the floor plan, or the sketch, it shows 30 by 36. And that's on another piece of,
Yeah, that other floor plan of the whole building.
so based on Section 19-7-5B3, it doesn't appear as though we can can approve this based on this, the squarage of this unit.
So the sketch plan, just, Joe, so I know what you've done, the sketch plan that she's given us that shows dimensions of 36 by 22,
Yeah,
coming up to 792 square feet.
right.
Ms. Wilson, is that in fact
I'm questioning.
the area that you're using for Tom? or your close personal
I'm
friend?
questioning that because it seems like I've measured and remeasured. And I had on the original application 480, and I don't know, I can't, I'm sure that the apartment is not that. It would have always fit into the parameters, and it hasn't changed. I'll have to go up there and look again. If the scaled floor plan of the entire building is 30 by 36, and you account for the eaves of the barn,
I think the eaves of the barn bring us to 22.
bring us to 22. That's where I'm wondering if the 22 is wrong, because I don't know how long, I don't know how big the eaves are.
Be about right, 4 feet on either side.
Yeah, I don't know. I would think the eaves, that would leave 4 feet of eaves on either side. I would think the eaves would be bigger than that, but I can't be sure. All I am sure of is that I know that it's not 700 square feet, so I'm thinking that that 22 feet here is wrong. And I checked and double checked, and I don't know how I got that.
Is it appropriate for our CEO to
To go
measure this?
yeah.
Well, the floor area is the sum of the contiguous horizontal area of the floors of a structure enclosed by exterior walls. So if it's 36, you got 6 inches on each side, so it's only 35. And then you got your stairs, which is in the floor area. But it's still, if you use a 22, you're still probably going to come up with more than the 600. But I can verify it.
The 22, I know I arrived at because I had already measured, as I said, for the floor plan of the entire structure. I'm thinking the 22 is a simple subtraction error from the 30. And what's going through my mind is maybe an eave is actually 8 feet instead of 4 on either side, but I don't know, I can't be sure. Without physically going up there and doing it again.
Well, Bruce, is it appropriate for you to confirm the measurements for the board?
Yes, I could do that.
Are my fellow board members in agreement that based on what Joe has raised, which seems to be a simple mathematical computation, but does in fact bring us well over 600 square feet, justifies having Bruce confirm the measurements of this unit?
I agree with that.
I agree. can't be over 16 feet wide in order to maintain under 600 feet. If it's 17 feet wide, that puts it at 612 square feet.
Right, but this, with the little bit of the stairway and the interior, yeah, probably.
But that would make your comment about the eve.
But I don't think
coverage,
it's,
correct?
I'm sure it's not even close to the 600. I was thinking from my original application that it was landed right there in the middle, 480 or 4 something.
Well, before we table this again to ask our CEO to measure the appropriate square footage for us, are there any other issues that should be addressed, or other issues or concerns that board members have that would prevent us from approving this, other than confirming the square footage?
Can I ask a question? Would it be appropriate to, instead of tabling again, can you do some sort of approval contingent upon?
No, I don't think we can do that.
Yeah.
I don't think that would be appropriate.
But there's no reason why the board can't, you asked the question if there was any other, you could work through the other issues.
Right.
And the only issue to resolve would be the square footage.
Right.
If you chose to do that.
I'm just thinking to save all of us. Make that into it.
Well, we're going to be here
I know.
either way. And you didn't drive that far to get here.
No, I didn't. I had to get a babysitter, though.
Well, it is important that we have that. It's one of the criteria of the ordinance.
I understand that. I know, certainly, but I just didn't know if there was a way to.
Well, short of us adjourning for a half hour now and driving out there together, which I'm not inclined to do, I think the best way for us would be to put it off again until next month.
Okay.
But in the meantime, make sure that there are no other issues that board members have.
David, I added what I thought was the square footage of the remaining portion of the building, the main portion of the house, and I came up with roughly 3,300 square feet. And we're pretty close to the maximum 25% of the maximum area allowed for a dwelling area, accessory dwelling unit. Shall occupy no one.
Second floor?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you taking into consideration second?
Well, no, I'm not, and that was another question I was going to ask, or the question I was getting to. Can we verify the square footage of the main building? That it is 3,300 square feet, or is it 6,600 square feet, or what might that be? I'm fairly comfortable that we're under the 25%, that the accessory dwelling unit does not exceed 25% of the resultant floor area. But if you're going to verify information, let's verify that also. The other things, Bruce, I'd like to have you verify, and again, if we're going to approve, or if we're being asked to approve an accessory dwelling unit, and I'm treating this like it's not there, do we have proper means of egress? Is the barn area sheet-rocked? Do we have the fire?
Would you be asking this if it wasn't built?
I wouldn't be asking it, no, because you would be verifying that during the construction process. Now, are you going to,
We covered that last week, and I will make sure that everything is up to code.
okay,
Can I
but could you report back to us next week just to satisfy me? And just for the record that,
Sure.
there is fireproofing in place, and there is a second means of egress, or the proper egress is in place. Just for the record. And I wouldn't ask this, Bruce, no, definitely not. I wouldn't ask this because I'm assuming you're going to be doing all of this, all right? I know you're going to be doing all this during the construction process, but where it is in place, you know, it's going to be very difficult for you to ask them to do this.
I'm getting 4,500 square feet of floor area, not including the barn area
Okay.
above.
Okay.
So I don't think there's any question with the 25%.
Okay, fine. Fine, thank you.
Also, just, maybe another question. I'm right in saying that in 1985, there was a proper building permit acquired for this. I know that you weren't here at that time, Bruce, but that's correct, right?
Well, it's unclear that it was a building permit issued, but not necessary for another dwelling within the,
Right.
right.
But the building permit that was issued would have gone over all of these percentages, is that correct?
No, because
No.
there was no accessory dwelling unit approval then.
So the percentage, the 25% doesn't apply
It would
for
apply,
whatever the permit was that was issued?
no.
I was just wondering if we were being redundant, knowing that this whole process probably would have taken place. 15
No, there's no
years.
question that there's enough square footage to get you your 600 square foot apartment. You know, it's just by roughing this out with the 1.5 story and the barn, with the loft and everything, you're at least at 50, almost 5,200 square feet.
So, Joe, your concerns are that there is a secondary means of ingress and egress to the accessory dwelling unit? That's one of the concerns?
Well, it's proper.
And is that
In the
required by
bedroom.
code?
In the bedroom, that there's egress
You have to
window.
have a means of egress.
The
Egress
window.
window in a bedroom, yes, and, yeah, but you only need one exit by code.
Just the bedroom is what I'm concerned about. And also that you do have a proper fire protection between the garage area or the barn area and the living area. And normally it's fire-rated sheetrock, 5/8 fire-rated sheetrock.
Yeah, and are these all things that you can verify for us, Bruce?
Again? Sure.
Okay. So, just so the minutes are clear, we're going to be asking that for the next meeting, that our CEO confirm the square footage of the total floor area of the residence.
Well, I think I've
that right?
resolved that issue here, right?
Yep.
Easily. There's easily enough floor area to get a 600 square foot legal accessory dwelling unit. There's no question.
Okay.
If you simply look at the tax assessor's card with the dimensions, it's well over. You could almost get a double.
And you'll confirm the floor area of the proposed
I will do
accessory
that.
dwelling unit? Any other concerns? Other issues as you look through the requirements, fellow board members? We have a motion to again table this matter until the next meeting.
What is the date of the next meeting?
Does anybody know?
It's a fourth Tuesday.
You think you get this up on more than one occasion?
The fourth Tuesday would be the 27th.
No, so-
Would it?
Yeah, because I'm going to be coming.
I'm not going to be here either. I'm on vacation, so. But I can.
Well, presumably you can get us the
I
information
can
with a
bring-
memo to us for the meeting.
Yes.
Do I need to be here?
You should be here.
Okay. Because I'm assuming there are no other questions that are going to come up.
I wish that I could say that that was a fair assumption, but there may very well be one or more questions.
That's not a possibility for you?
No.
Well, then request that the board table this until March and see what they say.
Could I request that this be tabled until March instead of February, because I will not be in town on the February meeting?
Well, considering the fact that this unit has been lived in for 8 or 10 years, I wouldn't think that a couple more months will matter to the town one way or another. So I am inclined, unless there are any objections, to say yes, that there's no reason why we can't take this up again in March. Dr. Chapman?
Bruce, if this unit exceeds 600 square feet, is this even subject to our review? Because, reading the wording, in no event,
You would not be able to prove it. That's correct.
do we even need to address it? I mean, if the reading says in no event, a simple academic question, if it exceeds 600 square feet, can we even review it?
I think what would happen would, the applicant would be posed with a question of whether they want to proceed by cutting the unit down to 600 square feet or removing the unit. And based on her answer, then it may come back before you or withdrawn and the kitchen removed.
Because if it exceeds 600 square feet, then it appears to be out of our hands at that point.
But at that point, the applicant will have the option to cut it down to 600 square feet or remove the kitchen. If they choose to take option A, then they'll come back to you, showing how the apartment's going to be at 600 square feet.
And if the kitchen is removed, then it's no longer an accessory dwelling.
Correct.
Okay, so the proposal is to table it until March? Do I hear a motion to table until March?
Well, I'll make the motion to table it to March meeting.
Second?
Seconded.
All those in favor? The motion passes by a vote of 6-0. And Ms. Wilson, this is once again tabled until the March 2001 meeting. Thank you for coming back. We will see you in March.
You want to call and set up a time?
Yeah, I'll talk to you in the morning. Maybe you can call me or I'll call you.
That being the only item of old business, there are no items of new business on the agenda. We do have on the agenda communications, and in the packet, there are two items of communication. One we received by mail, and that is a letter dated January 4, 2001, addressed to the board from Dan and Faye Lakeman, 22 Beacon Lane, addressing concerns they have over the construction of the residence of Ron and Mary Page. This board had approved a variance for the Pages, and the Lakemans have expressed concern over what construction is actually going on at the Pages' home. You also have a letter that you received tonight, which is a copy of a letter from Town Manager Mike McGovern. I'm just looking for, by date of January 16, from Michael McGovern to Mr. and Mrs. Lakeman, responding to their letter. And I don't think there's any specific action that we need to take on the Lakeman's letter. It's here for informational purposes. Anybody has questions or would like to discuss it, we can. I guess the only question I would have, Bruce, is if we want to be sure that an applicant builds the floor plan that is presented to us at the time the variance is granted, what would we have to do as a board to ensure that that happened?
Well, first off, the board should establish that the floor plan ties into one of the criteria under practical difficulty, and the approval would have to be based on that floor plan. At that point, you could make it as part of the record that that floor plan is the only thing that they can build. If it's directly tied in to the reasons why the practical difficulty was approved, I would suggest from the wording that I see there, that the board doesn't get into that situation, because I don't know how the town could even possibly track that a year or 5 years or 10 years down the road, unless we started making conditions on deeds as a covenant or a restriction or something to that effect. So it's not uncommon for somebody to come to the board this year with, let's say, in this case, this particular case, it's a one-story with instead of the knee wall kicked in where the rafters are, the knee wall goes up the outside 3 feet, and then the roof starts. What they decided they wanted to do, and they asked me if it was okay, is instead of going 3 feet above, they went 7 feet, and then they lowered the pitch. The whole issue with the board was the height. She specifically said that the height of the new would not exceed the height of the existing, and that all had to do with neighbors that made the case that the view and the shadowing and the like, that height did not exceed what was approved. So that's no different than because there's no square footage added. It's the same amount of square footage, it's simply a roof reconfiguration. There's no usable square footage added. Would be no different than an applicant doing that this year and then coming back next year to change the roof line and bring the wall up. There would be nothing that they would have to go to the board at that point to get a variance for, because the nonconformance hasn't increased. So that said, that's why I allowed the change. That plus the fact that there was nothing specific to that design that the board in their deliberations tied into any of the practical difficulty standards.
So is this an issue that is, for the most part, unavoidable? That it's going to come up from time to time?
No, if the board feels strongly that a design is tied to the practical difficulty, and the record clearly shows that you could make a condition that is the only design, and any change to that would have to come back before the board. I think that would be a rare occasion, because I don't think the design itself ties into the practical difficulty standards. Maybe the board feels different on that.
No, I think I would tend to agree with that.
I'd hate to see that happen, because like I say, unless you started actually making covenants attached to the deed that goes with the land, that would be almost impossible to track. In fact, it would be part, I mean, I could remember it maybe for a couple of years, but because I'm getting on in age too, so, memory might be failing me. But I think it would be a bad situation.
David?
But there may be a rare occasion where that would be a specific that you might have to do, but I don't know.
Mr. Frustasi?
In a number of cases, one of the arguments that the applicant makes is the aesthetic attractiveness of the building. And that's what they pitch to us, is how that building blends into the neighborhood, or the attractiveness of that unit. And if they came to me and pitched that and then changed it, I think I'd be a little upset, because that is one of their arguments. I mean, they're saying that, and I can remember a number of them that did get approved and some that didn't. But it's the aesthetics and the change, the visual change, that was attractive to the plan. And certainly it was a lot more, a little simpler to pass on it, as opposed to something with maybe a 312 roof pitch. And if that's what they've done up here, it's not, I don't think it's blending into the neighborhood. But I haven't seen it, so I'm not gonna pass on it. But if they came to me with when I say 312 pitch, that's a pitch on a roof of a ranch, as opposed to a steeper pitch that would be more attractive and more pleasing to the original design, I think I'd have a hard time passing or granting their request. So I think it ties in with their application, the aesthetic attractiveness of the building. But that's one person's opinion.
Well, something for us to keep in mind as we hear these in the future.
I'm inclined to agree with what Joe just said as well, because when they appear before the board, basically they've identified the footprint of the building that they, or the change that they propose to make. And that's the only thing that they're held to. They could significantly change the structure that they're building.
But what I didn't see, and correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't see any opponents or anybody speak up saying that that's the aesthetic that I want to see. The issues were the height, the shadowing, the view. All those issues were covered by people that were opposed to it. There was nobody that came forward and said, I like this design, and therefore, that's fine. Nobody ever said that, and the board never made that as a condition. Sure, they pitched the design, but the board didn't say, okay, yes, that's the design you got to do because that's the one we all like. Had they done that, then I would have said, no, you cannot do a change. So you didn't have both sides reacting on that, so.
I also think we don't grant a variance based on the aesthetic pleasingness of the project. We grant the variances to many factors, and the aesthetic value that the design offers is nice, and when we grant it, it's a vote of confidence that it's a good decision, but I don't think we do that alone, and I think that I haven't reevaluated this application, because it's been granted and it's over with, but I bet there's other factors that we would have had to, even if we didn't like the design, if they met the practical difficulty standard, we would have still had to have granted it. So I agree with Mr. Fistacci in that the aesthetic value does have an impact, but I think there's a lot more to it also that's out of our control and beyond our jurisdiction.
If you look on page 46, under B of the practical difficulty, it says the granting of variance will not produce an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood and will not unreasonably detrimentally affect the use or market value of abutting properties. In determining whether variance would have an unreasonable detrimental effect on the use or market value of abutting properties, zoning board shall consider if the variance would have the effect of blocking an established view, posing a fire safety hazard, casting a shadow on an adjoining lot, reducing the appraised value of an adjoining property by 10% or more, or eliminating the privacy of an adjoining property without the effect of mitigation to the lost property. It says nothing about anything to do with aesthetics. If the applicant come forward and said that the design that they built, and was able to prove that their adjoining property would be decreased by 10% or more because of design, you could say that design is improper. But none of the things that you're talking about fits within the criteria that I can see, so.
Let's go back to this case. Well, they visited us twice. The first time, I remember a lot of
We
people
have to be
support.
careful how we go back to the case, Mr. Chair.
Well, we were talking.
It's true, we're not going to revisit
No, we're talking about
the merits
support.
of the case.
We're talking about support. And the first time, there were a number of neighbors that had seen the blueprints, had seen the plan, and supported it based on what they saw.
I don't disagree with that,
Okay.
but that's no different than the neighbor saying, I don't like it. The board has to have some validation from somebody that wants it or doesn't want it that fit into the criteria. The board has said itself that they don't make the decision based on the fact that the neighbor likes it or doesn't like it.
Earlier, you described what occurred is that basically they changed the knee wall and they changed the pitch of the roof, but the uppermost height of the roof did not change.
That's correct. They proposed that to me when they wanted to do this change, because they wanted to go with the steep piece roof with a full 7 feet instead of 4 feet, kicking by the floor joists on the outside. And I said, no, you can't do that. The approval is clearly based on the height, and it's clearly tied into the shadowing and the view and the like.
The Lakeman's make that contention in their letter, though. Has it ever been verified that the height did not change?
Where is,
it was clearly, going into their second paragraph, starting with 4 weeks and then hitting into the second sentence in parentheses, it was clearly going to be taller than their existing house.
But it also says, while Bruce did not feel that he could approve the increase in height, and the pages were forced to abandon that plan, they say, I have allowed them to continue with all other significant departures from the plan, meaning go up 7 feet from 4 feet and have a shallow patch pitched roof. Same, I read the same thing when I read it the first
Okay,
time.
that clarifies it.
Well, I think that the point they're raising is simply something that we can bear in mind and maybe heighten our awareness to cases in the future where, if it becomes appropriate, to condition the grant based on the floor plan that's given to us, but keeping in mind the issues that Bruce has raised, that it may be simply an impractical condition to impose on somebody when we grant a variance.
I did run this by the town attorney, and he felt, he expressed the same thing that I just told the board, that unless it's directly tied to the extent that that's what has to be done to make it work, then the board really should try to stay away from that. They shouldn't say that, well, yes, this is good, so we're going to make an approval. It has to be really tied to some substantive evidence to that degree to make it stick. And he suggested that he did suggest that the board don't go there if they don't have to.
Well, it seemed to me that Mr. McGovern's letter to the Lakemans was a sufficient response, and that there's nothing that the board needs to do to respond to the letter that's been given to us.
I agree.
There being no other communications, does anybody else have any other business to bring before the board tonight?
Other than, like I say, I'm not going to be here in February, and if there are any cases come in, I'll make sure that I have a good memo to the board explaining exactly why it's here, and hopefully you'll be able to have the questions answered you need.
Well, give us your cell phone number and be available.
I have it. But other than that, I don't have anything else.
Since we have a couple of minutes, there was something in the packet regarding a decision by a superior court. And based on that verdict, is there anything we want to do to improve the method in which we hear cases?
The Armstrong case you're talking about?
Yes.
I thought the judge was quite impressed with the town, the code enforcement officer.
That wasn't what I was
and the Board of
asking for,
Appeals.
Bruce.
I don't think there's any issues that the board have to address. I think it was clear that we made the right decision. The board made the right decision. You guys ought to be happy that.
Is there something that you have in mind, Joe, as to
No.
a procedure, a better procedure that should be followed in here?
No, you all read the letter. I hope you all read it, and I was just wondering if there's things that we want to do to improve. We've made some dramatic improvements in the 6 years that I've been on the board, and we're going in the right direction to keep our our record unblemished.
I've read a lot of court cases when it comes to land use, and I've been involved with some, and there's been none stronger. And you probably, as Dave and you, Catherine, the judge was fairly impressed with the board. And,
He's a good judge, too, Judge Crowley.
he spent some time.
Joe, I would think other than perhaps clarifying the burden of going forward and the burden of proof so that no party is under a misunderstanding or misapprehension as to who has the burden. I didn't read anything in the opinion that gave me concern about the way the hearing was conducted.
Okay. Just thought I'd bring it up since we had some time, and...
Was there some specific, Joe, that you?
No,
Like,
no,
no?
no. We're on camera. No, it was a difficult case. It was a difficult case, and obviously, I thought we were more than generous in interpreting the high water line, and
I was at the hearing that day, and it was really interesting, the questions he asked, both our attorney and the Armstrongs. He was really delving. Did a good job.
Well, and before you discuss it much further, I'd remind you that the decision is not final. I mean, there is still the opportunity for an appeal to the Supreme Judicial Court.
Well, anytime someone questions our actions, I'm looking as an opportunity to correct something we might not have done, or at least to refine something that we did do. And that's why I brought it up, for us to take a look at it and see if we want to continue to refine our procedures. If there's no other discussion, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Well, I will be the first to agree and support any suggestion that we should and always can look at ways to do things better, not only for our purposes, but for purposes of every citizen who comes before the board. So I'm in full favor of that. And to the extent that anybody hasn't read it, the decision, I think you should. I think it's an educational process to read any decision on the issues that come before us, especially when it's a decision reviewing the actions and decision of this board. So, any other matters? Hearing none, is there a motion for adjournment? Certainly, since we have nobody else in the room, you may.
Two things, actually, as I'm driving home. The 22 feet was bothering me, and I did front my measure, and it is actually 14. The eaves are 8 each. And when I was doing my subtraction, I only subtracted 1 in. Of course, at this point in time, we're still going to have Bruce come out and take his measurements, which is fine. The second thing that I remembered on the way home is that I will not be here in March either, for the 4th week in March.
Is your husband available in either February or March?
He may be here.
You know, why don't you come up to the podium for us, since none of what you are saying is on the record.
Right. I was thinking that too, as I was tabling it again until March, that he may be able to, I can't speak for him. I know tonight he was away on business, so he couldn't be here, and something like that may come up that I can't foresee. That's also a possibility, that he may be able to be here both in February or March.
Why don't we leave it on for March?
Leave it in March.
And if
The 4th Tuesday, is that what you said? I'll just check my calendar.
Fourth
with him.
Tuesday.
And if the time comes and neither one of you can show up and you need to request that it be tabled further,
Delayed by-
it can be done at that time.
Okay,
Okay?
very good.
Motion for adjournment? Do we have a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Do we have a motion? Motion.
Motion.
Ms. Miller, second.
Seconded.
Mr. LaPlante? All those in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned.